finding us. I'm here with my wonderful friend Melo, and I'll be introducing you to her.
Reality, but it's also...
That's all right. That's just life. That's life in the live city here. It's funny because I try to listen, and the next thing you know, I'm playing myself. So I'll just give folks a moment to come on.
Okay.
Let me find us. Say hello when you join us. See, I haven't even found us, so I know we're here somewhere. Ooh, and I'm blue. So let me see if I can make me not blue. See,
there you are.
There I am. Is that better, everyone? Let's see. Did I come on?
Now you're dark on my side.
All right. Let me just see here. These technical things I'm just having to learn here. Let's see. Better?
Better.
There we are. Hi, everyone. See, I was blue for a moment. Blue is very normal in grief. So there you go.
Yes.
Welcome, welcome. All right. I'm glad to... Wait, I just went blue again. What's that about? You're going to have to do the show in a moment. Let's see here. It's going to be all you. Let's see. Hopefully that helps.
Handsome and blue.
Just when I'm just completely blue, right? Tell me if that happens again during this, and I'll try to correct it here. Wonderful. Yeah, I can't tell when the screen goes blue at my end. So let's see who we've got here. We've got Susan from Ohio. Hey, Kim. Naomi from the Bay Area. Don from Ohio. Hey, Carla from Georgia. Terry from Indiana. Pat, you can see me okay. Great. Shirley from Pennsylvania. Michelle from Los Angeles. Hey, Clarissa from Canada. So yeah, come on, say hi. We're going to have a really interesting discussion in just a few moments. Sherry's from Iowa. Good to see you. I always think when I think about Iowa, besides all the presidential stuff, I also think a field of dreams. Alexandra is here from St. John, Canada. Wonderful, wonderful. Jamie's from Michigan. Hey, Jamie. Donna from Pennsylvania. I joke about this is like our romper room. Kim's from Seattle. Natasha's from Missouri. Shelly's from Nashville. So glad you're all here. Chantal from Connecticut. And you don't have to say hi or where you're from. Some enjoy doing that. I just feel like as we're kind of isolated, it's a good way for us all to connect. Sue from Utah. So wonderful. I'm glad you're all here. We have a tradition of taking just a moment in silence. We're all here because someone we love has died. And so I just like to take a moment to send them love. I don't believe when they die, we quit loving them. And I don't think they stop loving us. So let's just take a moment in their honor if we could. Thank you, everyone. So I have a dear guest on with me, a dear friend, Melo Garcia. Now I have a friend, Melo. You go by Melo, right?
No, I actually go by Melo too.
Oh, it's funny because someone said Melo the other day, and I'm like, oh, have I been pronouncing her name wrong?
No.
Oh my gosh, I've been talking about you for so long, and I've always been Melo. And then someone said Melo, and I went, oh. So see, you shouldn't listen to people.
Yes.
Melo Garcia. See, all right, I had it right all this time.
You did. You've always done it right. So today I was a little confused, but I was like,
no, maybe someone said Melo Garcia, and I'm like, oh, all right. Well, see, so Melo Garcia has a story that just touched my heart. I put her in my new book. She's just so amazing, and I wanted to share her with all of you. So just tell us about what brought you to this unfortunate world of grief that we're all dealing with.
Oh, gosh. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much, David. You know that I adore you on professional, personal level. You are just utterly, honestly, a lifesaver. And you'll know why. I think you already know why as I share my journey. So I was 35 years old back in 2010. And I was just kind of relaxing on a Sunday afternoon, and I got a call from my mother, and she communicated to me that my dad had gone into the restroom and he wouldn't come back out. So I was in Las Vegas, living in Las Vegas, Nevada with Chloe's dad, and you'll find out who Chloe is in just a little bit for you that don't know who she was or who she is in this story. And so Chloe's dad worked night shifts, so we would sleep. We were kind of nocturnal at that time. And so I told my mom I had a really weird feeling. And so I wanted her to get some type of help. And long story short, my dad had died of an aneurysm that went straight to his heart. So it was considered to be a massive heart attack. And he died that afternoon. And so I took a drive, the longest drive of my life, from Las Vegas to Southern California. It was about 5 hours away, but it felt like it took me 20 hours to get there. And I got there, and my mother had turned white, like a sheet, kind of like my sweater. And she said, I need to go to the hospital. Now, she suffered from congestive heart failure, but she had a massive heart attack that night. They were 3 days shy from their 48th wedding anniversary. So she went into the hospital, and I decided I was going to leave my life in Las Vegas, and I was going to take care of her. And in that moment, though, that I lost my dad, I also lost my mom on an emotional, spiritual, and physical way. She was breathing, but she just wasn't there. Like, she wasn't who she had been from that afternoon that she had called me. And so she was in the hospital, and Chloe's dad went back to Las Vegas, and I was kind of left with, am I going to have a funeral for my dad? What's going to happen? And I started feeling really kind of weird, really fatigued and tired, and I had some types of symptoms. So I went to a doctor in urgent care here in California, and it turns out that I was 2 weeks pregnant. And I had already suffered from a miscarriage and an ectopic pregnancy, but this was it. I was going to get my happy ending, my happily ever after. We had prayed for this pregnancy. We had gone to look at fertility treatments. We were in line to have this beautiful baby. And because I was 35, and I mentioned that because I was considered to be a geriatric pregnancy, and I was immediately put on bed rest. And I did all the right things, though. I stayed on bed rest. I ate well. I did all the things that you're supposed to do. And in December, we got our first ultrasound. We were told that this pregnancy was going to be a little boy. We were so excited. And I was getting very stir crazy from being, how funny, right? How ironic. Having to be homeward bound. I was in my home. I was on bed rest. I wasn't allowed to move around a lot. And so all of a sudden, I decided I was going to go to Las Vegas for the Christmas holiday. And so on December 24th, Chloe's dad came and got me. We drove to Las Vegas. He was still working night shifts. He's a diesel mechanic to this day. And he went to work, and I just felt really strange. And I called my mom. She was still in the cardiac rehab that I had left her in. And she said, I don't know, I have a really weird feeling. I think you need to go to the hospital. And so I went to the hospital, and I was told it was a UTI. And I went back home, and on December 29th, I started hallucinating. And I thought my dad was sitting with me in the living room. And he said, you are in labor. You need to go to the hospital. So Chloe's dad was still kind of trying to lead life as normal. And I said to him, my dad was just here, and he told me I needed to go to the hospital, and he found me urinating in the living room. And he knew all of a sudden I needed to go to the hospital. I went to the hospital, and they did an ultrasound, and my water had broke. And my OBGYN came in, Dr. John Martin from Las Vegas, a wonderful human. And he said, Melo, we need to take out your baby. We need to take your baby out of your body, or you and your baby are both going to risk dying. And so I said, okay, let's do it. So we went into the operating room. We did the baby's birth via C-section. And all of a sudden, this little baby comes out, not weighing more than 1.7 pounds at 24 weeks gestation to the day. And this baby that came out, all of a sudden they put a pink beanie on our baby, and we instantly met Chloe Carolyn Garcia. And Chloe was born at 4:32 p.m., I believe, in Las Vegas, Nevada, at Centennial Hills Hospital. And she wasn't expected to live through the night. Dr. Martin told me, I don't want to get your hopes up, but she's very small. She's fighting a lot of challenges. We're going to transfer her over to the NICU at Valley View Hospital. And we said goodbye to her. And I instantly saw her. I wasn't allowed to hold her. I just saw her. And instantly, this feeling of unconditional, indescribable love came to me. And I told Chloe's dad, you need to go and be with her. You need to go with her, because we were in different hospitals. And so he went there and he stayed with her. And I was very sick. They kept me in the hospital for about 5 or 6 more days. A kidney infection is what led to her premature birth. And so I had a kidney infection, I had a temperature, and they wanted to keep me to make sure that I was okay. But every second I was just wanting to go and to be with her. And so I got out of the hospital, I think January 1st or 2nd. And then I went back to California, got my mom, brought my mom back to Las Vegas with me. And we started to live the life of NICU parents. And for you that aren't familiar, is basically you're allowed a 1 to 2 hour visit at a time. And then you have to go back out, and then you're allowed to come back in and visit her or visit your baby. And so that's what we did. And she was meeting all of her milestones. And on January 20th, we got a call at 2:00 in the morning that Chloe had developed a fever, and she had developed something called NEC. And basically, in layman's terms, what NEC is it starts to destroy your guts. It's kind of an infection that will destroy your small gut or your big gut, or possibly both. So they took her in for one of her many surgeries, and they had found that they tried to cut as much of the gut that they could out to destroy the infection per se. And so she went to surgery, and they said, you know what, we don't know exactly how she's going to be, but we know that she's still meeting her milestones. So we're just going to keep her in observation. And so she continued to thrive, and she developed a personality. She was making goo-goo eyes at her dad. Every time her dad's voice would be heard, or he'd walk into her NICU area, she had a heart monitor, and her heart rate would instantly go up. And she would get mad, and she would hold her breath. And she showed signs of what I thought to be is that she was going to live and thrive, and we were going to get through this difficult time. And then around Valentine's Day, 2011, she was weighing almost 6 pounds. The doctor said, we're going to probably have to take her back into surgery next week. Well, that next week turned into February 22nd. And when we went there, her dad was still working. And so we went like at 6 or 7 in the morning before surgery. She wasn't scheduled to go into surgery until 1 in the afternoon. And the doctor said that she was really uncomfortable, and she was really whiny. And we were trying to hold her and comfort her and soothe her. But she was what we thought maybe colicky. But it turns out that she was in a lot of discomfort. They took her in for that one last surgery, and they brought her back out, and they said that the NEC had destroyed most of her gut, and that she would have to live the rest of her life till probably the life expectancy would have been till 3 years old, but that she was basically feeling like she wasn't getting enough to eat, and she was starving to death. And so we had to make a choice, and we decided to take her off of her respirator ventilator. And she passed away that day at around 2:30 in the afternoon, very close to the time that my dad passed away. And when she passed away, the pain to even describe brings so much difficulty in being able to verbally communicate what I was feeling. But at the time, I just bought back then it was a 3S iPhone, And I went through the phone because I just wanted to call every number in there because I was going to find somebody to help me. For someone to stop this from happening. Why was this happening to my baby? Why was my baby having to suffer? And she died in her dad's arms. And it was just me, her dad, and my mom, because all of our family, they lived in California. And actually a neighbor had come and met us, a neighbor that had been my childhood neighbor, and she happened to be in Las Vegas, and she met us. And we sat there, and I just screamed in hysteria. And that day I lost my mind. And I would look around, and my mom would look at me with this worried look, and she would tell me, feel it. It's okay. You feel what you feel. Just feel it. And so I remember the social worker being there. I don't remember what was said. I remember walking outside, and all of a sudden everything looked so dark and bleak and impossible. So I went out, and I remember I thought, what am I going to do? My happily ever after is gone. I have no reason. I shouldn't be living. And then I thought, well, I still have my mom, and I'm going to keep my mom alive, and I'm going to take care of her, and I'm going to make sure that she's okay, and Chloe's dad's okay. And by then, me and Chloe's dad, in all honesty, the only connection that we held was our daughter. In all of this, I think that I really lost myself, and I think he lost himself, because we both had wanted for so long in our marriage this beautiful baby. And we had this beautiful baby, and then she was taken from us. And I don't want to speak for him, but I know on my side, I felt as if I was disconnected, yet so connected, because he was the only other person that could relate or understand with what I was feeling. So time went on, and we became more and more distant. And as time went on, my mom got sicker and sicker. And in the whole year was a blur. That Halloween was supposed to be Chloe's first Halloween. And instead, I got a dog named Brother, a pit bull that Chloe's dad brought to me. Many psychics and mediums have said that Chloe sent him to me, and he was this big in the palm of my hand. And now he's sitting in my backyard, and he weighs over 100 pounds. He's a red-nosed pit bull. He doesn't know he's a dog. He thinks he's a boy. And he became my baby along with my mom. But then in 2012, Chloe's dad broke his ankle, and he started to be my mom's constant companion. And in October of 2012, a little over a year and some months that my baby Chloe had died, my mom died. And the night that she died, she told me she was afraid to die because she didn't want to leave me, and she was worried that I wouldn't be okay. And that night, I lied. I lied to her, and I told her that I was just fine and that I would be okay, and for her to go and rest. So I watched her take her last breath. And when she took her last breath, the little bit that I had mentioned, how I had lost my mind, it was all gone. It was gone. And I felt like I didn't have any reason or any purpose to live. And I know a lot of people had already told me that my baby had died, for me to get over it, for me to try to have another. If I had another baby, I would feel better. But obviously, by what I'm describing, you understand that losing both of my parents and my child, and anyone who's lost someone that they love, you understand that there's no way that any one person is replaceable. There is no way that there is any cure or solution for grief. I just didn't know at that point. At that point, I wasn't sure of what I was feeling. And in February of 2013, after I'd contemplated suicide, ending my life. I felt like there was no reason. In that meantime, I had found out that Chloe's dad had had an affair. And in that moment, I recognized that I was, for the first time in my life, utterly, completely alone. And the shock, the betrayal, how could he do that when my baby had died? How could he do that? But what I wasn't hearing and what I wasn't understanding is that his child died too. His daughter, his little baby daughter died too. And I knew that I needed to put the little energy that I had left into understanding what I was feeling. And I'd had a background in mental health and and not because I have him here, but there were 2 books I picked out. And one was David Kessler's, and one was a book by Carol Roswell, way before her housewife days, but it was called What Remains. And I read those books cover to cover, where the covers started to fall off because I had every part highlighted. And I knew that I still couldn't make sense and verbalize what infant loss or what an early loss of miscarriage or the inability to get pregnant and hold the pregnancy. That whole process, I couldn't find the right words to describe it. So I decided that I was going to start studying grief and loss of all cultures, all types of religions, all types of different beliefs, from Freud to Sigmund to Carl Jung, to learn and understand what the meaning was of grief and loss. And in 2015, after I had earned the right to call myself a grief specialist by academics, I also learned that, oh my gosh, sorry guys.
It's okay. It's live. It's completely fine. It's funny. You talk with your hands. I do that too.
I then went and by 2015, 15, had earned the right to call myself a grief specialist. I don't think I, at that point, was even out of the amount of pain that I felt. And so I decided I wanted to start to do something, create a community for infant loss, for the loss of my little baby, for people to get educated, not to say things like, when are you going to try again? Why don't you have another baby? And I didn't know how or what. And so I met a man by the name of Michael Gevin. And Michael Gevin was the videographer for Tony Robbins, Brandon Burchard, all the big names. And he was starting a group, a mastermind of sorts called Jumpstarters. And so I told him about my vision about After Chloe, but I don't think if I hadn't met Michael, I would have ever done anything with it. But then Michael Gevin made me a logo, which is still my logo to this day, of After Chloe. And he said, you got to do a website. Here's my guy, Finn. He's still my web guy. And we went from there. And then from there, he said, I want you to concentrate on one platform. And I was introduced to Instagram. It's where I felt I had found my people. And I started to really just talk about how I felt and the pain and the pain coming over me and taking me, and me feeling so utterly alone in a room full of people that didn't speak about grief and loss. And as time went on, I met so many incredible souls that faced loss loss of their marriage, loss of their age, loss of their empty nest syndrome, loss of their infants, loss of the ability to ever be a parent, loss of their foster child not being able to be adopted. And I started hearing all these amazing stories. And I knew that if I understood to hold space and create a place to witness that loss, that we together could create a community. And that's what happened. And along the way, if you ever told me in 2013, when I contemplated suicide, that the author that wrote the book that saved my life would someday honor my story and my journey, I wouldn't believe it.
It was my honor. It was my honor. It deserved to be in a book. You and Chloe deserved to be in a book.
And I think a lot of times that we believe that there's never a way through. And I've learned through so much of just witnessing others' grief and witnessing my own grief and witnessing Chloe's dad's grief and understanding that there's a void that's always there, that every loss is never going to be filled. That void will never be filled. But for me, it was just about really, even before I came on today, I'm always talking to Chloe or to my mom or my dad. And I'm like, I just want to make you proud. I just want you to be proud to know that I just won't give up. And for me, the greatest gift is when people like David or a community like After Chloe, we help you to understand that there's always a way through. It may not be my way. It may not be David's way. It may not be whoever comes on and speaks to you. But if you take a little bit of what can resonate with your heart and you hold that love that remains, that love is what gets you through. That's the only way I can describe it.
Thank you so much for your story. I so appreciate you. There's so many things that it brings up for me. One, that book you're in, Finding Meaning. It was interesting to me. As I was contemplating chapters, I thought about, of course, I was going to write about child loss, but I thought about infant death and I thought about miscarriage. And there were a number of people who were like, yeah, but that's not your area. It's not your specialty. Mm-hmm. And I just said, I just feel wrong about writing a book on grief and not putting those in. And so I relied on people like you and your story to really bring that to life. And one of the things you said that I want to point out that I heard so much over and over, women say, and husbands too, men say, parents, I was doing everything right. There's such an unspoken something that if you have a miscarriage, if your baby dies, did you do everything right? And I think it's so important that people are talking about miscarriages and infant deaths to know that death happens and horrible things happen in this world. And it's not anyone's fault. It's not anyone's fault. And I think it's so easy for people to blame themselves. And I've heard so many women tell me that people will ask, well, were you taking vitamins? Were you doing everything right? Like, let's run through everything you should be doing. You didn't drink, did you? You didn't smoke, you didn't, right? And I see women turn on themselves and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, you think, for me personally, I thought for a really long time my body had given up on me, or my body failed me, or if I had dieted, if I was thinner, if I was, if I'd been younger. I spent so many years trying not to get pregnant. And so when I wanted to get pregnant, all of a sudden, in my mind at that time, obviously I know different today, but I believe my body was failing me. And so when I really surrendered to being gentle with myself, and what this whole journey has really taught me is that I had to learn to love myself the way that my parents had loved me, and the way that my daughter Chloe loves me, and the way that I want to show the world that no matter what you lose, that love and that ability to love yourself and to be your own advocate, to be your own rescuer, to be your own human, and allow that grief to come and to be honest about it. And I used to really just kind of shut down when people would say things to me that would offend me about my grief and loss and about losing an infant. When you lose an infant, you don't realize how uneducated or unwilling people are to understand or to respect that loss as they would if you had an older child, or when your parent dies. If I have the stacks of sympathy cards when my parents died in comparison to the little stack when my daughter died. And so I think that we've done a really good job, David. And it's funny, I didn't mean to laugh because it was just really out of any book, your book helped me so much because you're the first person that really gave me permission to honor my grief and to honor my loss. And it's really propelled into, as we were talking, when we did the tech test, is that when the affair happened, it wasn't the affair. It wasn't that I thought that they were going to go live happily ever after. And maybe if Chloe's dad had been in a different space, that may have happened. I don't want to, I'm not a fortune teller, but I can tell you that I grieved that. And the pain that I felt really compared to the pain when I lost my daughter. And what I've learned after so many years is that when you experience the loss of the way that you thought your life was going to be, that is the hardest grief and loss to deal with. And that can be in the form of losing your loved one. That can be in a form of losing your partner on a level of divorce. And there is no comparison to your loss and to your pain. Every pain and every loss is relative. And really, David, you gave me that platform. You gave me that ability to scream it from the rooftops with the F word sometimes, or to just sit here and cry and not be so poised. And I think when we all come on here, we want to say something poignant, and I want to give them hope and belief. But the truth is just to feel what you feel. And you're the one that gave me permission to do that.
Well, I fall apart at least once a day, so at least. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to post them. Tell me about your work now with people and how you're helping people.
Gosh, well, I do one-on-ones when it's needed. I do this, which you were a part of last year, an online summit annually at the end of the year. And I am just an advocate for grief and loss. I'm starting a podcast, and I am also kind of doing a couple things that I want to do with group settings, a type of group setting on a virtual arena. But yeah, if you go to afterchloe.com, you can find me, and that's kind of what I do. I really just try to spread Chloe's legacy wherever it'll go.
By the way, has anything with COVID-19 been triggering?
Yes, it has. When you go into the NICU, you are required to wash your hands. And if you press down on the pedal, the song that comes on in their NICU is Happy Birthday. And you have to wash your hands twice over. So the other day I was washing my hands and I'll sing Happy Birthday. And I started bawling. And I talked to myself and I was like, Mello, what's going on? Are you okay? And I was like, that happy birthday song was so triggering for me, and washing my hands and the cross-contamination and the gloves, because when you're in the NICU, you have to be very sanitary and you have to be very almost sterile to go in there and for all those little babies. And so that was very triggering. And then also just being alone with myself. It's the first time in my life that I've ever faced something like this, or well, we've never faced anything like this, but anything traumatic or massive on a worldwide level without my parents. And so I've really had to kind of self-soothe myself. But yeah, it's been very triggering, definitely.
I can imagine. Hope says, I just sent she was talking about, I guess a lot of what you said came up when she would do compassionate friends groups also.
Yes.
Jerry says, it's hard as a mother to not feel you have done something to cause the issue. It took time, and 24 years later, she says, I still go there occasionally. Mm-hmm. People are expressing a lot of love for you. You'll have to go back and look at it.
Yes, I will.
It says blame and guilt to find some sense of control, but all we do is hurt ourselves more. Yeah, I always say we'd rather feel guilty than helpless. You know, our mind wants to go to guilt. Janet says, I'm learning to honor my husband's loss. Carla says, tell the truth always. I can now say this. It's been 30 years, April 7th. My Mickey died 2 days after his birthday. Jamie says, divorce is a different kind. It's the death of a different kind. You know, with all this going on, one of the things that you mentioned is the idea of comparing. And I always say it's the death of something, where, you know, a divorce is the death of a marriage. A betrayal is the death of the trust. Or the sanctity or the non-replaceability you thought you had. And we're all dealing with the loss of the world we knew now and our normal world and normal life. And, you know, one of the things I always say is, if someone's had a wedding canceled during this, I mean, I get they can have another wedding in 2 months or 3 months or whatever. And at the same time, it may be their worst loss that they've had. She might have been dreaming about that wedding since she was 5. And that loss doesn't take away from my son dying or my parents dying. It doesn't take away from Chloe. This idea that one loss takes from another is sort of a crazy thing we have around grief that I'm glad we're talking about it and letting it go. Phelan said, I think it is, on After Chloe, you briefly mentioned how you had complicated grief when your father died. Can you talk about that complicated grief?
Ooh, thank you. Thank you for the question. And everyone that's, you know, facing loss, I'm so sorry for your loss of your loved one. Complicated grief. My dad was August 4th. I was August 13th. We were both Leos. And I think if I'm like anybody in the world, I'm most like my father. So we had a very turbulent, tumultuous, complicated relationship. And I don't think I ever thought about my parents not being on this earth, as funny as that may sound. And so when he died, I don't think I had time or the mindset to even understand or fathom the loss. So where it got really complicated for me is that I didn't grieve it until probably when my mom died. When Chloe died, you know, she died almost, 8-9 months after him. In our culture, the Hispanic culture, they say that, you know, he was sad wherever he is. You know, some people say he's in heaven or, and so he was waiting for her. And that gave me a lot of weird comfort, because I believe that they are together wherever they are, whatever you believe. I don't want to put that on you, but I know what I believe, and I believe that they're all together. And so I felt very comforted that he was there waiting for her in my mind, the way that it went down. And so I don't think I started to really grieve him until my mom died. And I think like today when I was testing tech, David told me, come in and come back out. And I said, oh my gosh, my dad always tells me unplug it or plug it back in. And in that moment, I'll grieve him. Like I'll miss him. I miss him every time. I never had to pump gas or do so many different things that my dad did for me. My dad taught me so many things. My dad is the reason why I went to college and got so many degrees, because he was a Hispanic man that barely graduated from high school and he wanted better for me. But where the grief got really complicated is that it wasn't immediate. It was almost like an adrenaline where I think I went into shock for a really long time. Now looking back at it, and I didn't grieve it immediately. So that's kind of what I describe complicated grief as.
Very good. Very good. You know, and there's also for people, there's a term complicated grief that's in the DSM-5, which is how counselors get paid. And, you know, it talks about an emotion that you have after 6 months. So for instance, the fact that 6 months in a day, I'm still sad that my son died, or 6 months in a day, you would still be sad about Chloe. They call it complicated grief. So I just remind people, it's a payment mechanism. We want our counselors to get paid, but don't take that on that like there's something wrong with you. I feel like everyone's got complicated grief. Like who's got like a simple death, you know, unless your mom had like such a good life at 110 and she was so ready to go and you were, I mean, otherwise. A couple of things here I want to mention. Let's see. Melo, was there any one thing that really helped you after Chloe? Is there any sort of just...
You know, no. I think it was just really feeling it. And I think for me, I tried to go to various therapists, but a lot of them don't specialize in grief. So I think that when I finally found a therapist that was really able to help me work through my grief. But again, I recommend like specific books that I know of that would really help when you've lost an infant. I think that it is very specific when you are first facing loss, when you're in the I always call it the lobby of the grief and the loss. And so when you figure out which room you're going to go into after the lobby, I think that it's important that you allow yourself that ability to wait in the lobby and kind of feel through it. That helped me a lot. Again, because of the 3 losses that I experienced, I think that I had delayed grief where it was delayed. And so again, I waited in the waiting room or the lobby. And then by the time I got to where I needed to go, I knew enough to know which books to look for and what to look for in a therapist, I think.
Wonderful. And I, you know, part of probably one of my biggest audiences I do lectures for is counselors and therapists. And one of the things they've told me over the years when I ask, why did you come? Why are you coming to a grief group? I mean, to a grief session as a counselor. And they've always said, there's an assumption that if you just live and you're a counselor, you're going to do grief well. And they say, until someone walks in your office grieving, then you're like, oh, I don't know as much about this as I think I do. And I love that they show up to learn more. And so I'm just in awe of how many amazing counselors there are out there that do grief so well.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you. We're already out of time. We just go through this time so quickly. You are a gift to so many. Please let people know again where they can find you at.
Yes, you can find me if you go to afterchloe.com. I'm After Chloe on every social media platform. I don't have a TikTok. Wait, I do have a TikTok, but have you TikTok, David? You have to TikTok.
I have not TikTok yet.
You got a TikTok. It's
clearly in the air. It's clearly in the air. All right. Well, thank you so much. I just so appreciate you being here, sharing yourself, sharing your story, being a part of my history, being a part of the book. It just warms my heart. And, you know, Chloe and all our loved ones just continue to live by us remembering them and talking about them. So that's what makes all of this an honor. If you're new to the group, we do this every night, and we have a different person on every night. And then during the day, 1 p.m. I come on. I may have to miss tomorrow, but someone else will be there. And we have wonderful people. Tomorrow night, we're going to have at 5 p.m. Kim Goldman's going to be here, who's going to talk about the loss of her brother, Ron Goldman. And you may know her from the podcast Confronting O.J. Simpson. Thursday night will be Jason Green, who's the amazing author of Once More We Saw Stars after his daughter died. Friday, Cheryl's going to be here from Team Sharing to talk about the opioid epidemic. And then Saturday night, we're going to have the wonderful, she's just another gift in my life who helped me so much, is Diane Gray. And she's the spokesperson from the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross Family Foundation. And she's also a hospice palliative care expert. And next week, we're going to have some great people after that. There's going to be Beth Segaloff, who's going to talk to us about death after a fiance. And I got word tonight we were looking for someone and had put it out, someone who had a parent die, to also share their story with us. And I'm excited to say Melissa Rivers volunteered.
Oh, yeah.
I want to talk about her mom joke. So those are every night we're here. And then 1 p.m. Pacific time. These are Pacific times. Go to thetimeconverter.com if you want to know, thetimezoneconverter.com, to know what time in your area. Because with COVID-19, it broke my heart that people were grieving alone and didn't have a place to go. So that's why we're all here. All these amazing guests are volunteering their time. So thank you. Thank you so much. Melo, you're the best.
Thank you. You're the best.
And I will see you all very soon. Take care.
Bye, guys.
And support one another in the group, as I know you do. Thank you.